here's a really good cake. And it's like, yeah, it is a pretty good cake, but is it a unique cake? Is it an interesting cake? I don't know. Am I off? Is that what research is? Sorry.
Hello, Mike. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday, Jack. Welcome back to our ongoing discussion over everything AI. We should have a
Mm.
tagline by now. What's up? What's up with AI this week? No, that's actually I don't really like the term AI. Have we come up with a
Mm.
better one?
Well, no, not sure. I mean, we've been kind of chatting about kind of like its less than stellar usefulness in some areas. Then maybe we can come up with like kind of something opposite to super AI or AGI. Maybe we could come up with you know almost AI or something. Or
Well, I
almost I.
mean, we've been in it long enough that I think we both agree, and I've got a couple of topics. We left last week, and you were just spending your time in academia
Mm,
uh, recently, and so we were ending. I think we ended last time we spoke with the concept of like research papers being sort of graded by and or written by AI. You know that, and I wish we had a better term
mm,
for it, right?
mm,
But and I was started telling Elizabeth that at least in my own journey, and this was just because I didn't know what I was doing, is that I started having AI write quite a bit of stuff based on my
mm,
prompt, right? So it would do a lot of writing because it's really verbose and, you know, is good at all the things that I wasn't good at. And also, I'm a little impatient. I wanted to sort of look at it
mm,
and see if it was any good and such like that. So I kind of started there.
mm,
So it would write something and I would edit it, if that makes sense.
mm,
And then I learned sooner or later that I would rather just do the first pass myself and have it edit it, right? Like so
mm,
that seemed to me like kind of my journey, you know, how you kind of start out with this thing does this amazing kind of work, but when it comes to research, I'm not so sure because the I think isn't the concept of research, and forgive me because I don't know that I ever did any research. Did I ever do any research? I had ideas, but I don't know that I
mm,
researched anything. But how's
mm,
this is that you would have some idea and then you would try to prove or disprove your conclusion and you come up with some sort of experimental way to do it. And then you publish your results and the way you did your experiment. And so it's really more of like a how to. It's kind of like a
mm.
recipe, you know, like here's a really good cake. And it's like, yeah, it is a pretty good cake, but is it a unique cake? Is it an interesting cake? I don't know. Am I off? Is that what research is? Sorry.
Yeah, so that there's a few characteristics that should be attached. That the research should be the topic should be meaningful, right? So it's
Right. A good cake, an interesting
yeah,
cake, not just
yeah,
the run of the mill cake, right?
and it should be unique, right? So it's
Yeah.
another super well specified term, right? And it should be kind of accepted by the community, right? So,
Mm.
so that those were the three things that I was hearing all the time when I was in the grad program that required research, right? So, uh, my committee required, that I publish. Without that, there wouldn't be any progress, kind of officially in my academic life, which is probably a standard approach. But now I think what we are kind of changing into is maybe a situation where, if we believe, let's say, that the guys that talk about AI are right, the AI influencers, like in a couple of years, physics will be solved and AI will be
Right.
solved, meaning
Yeah.
that, we're gonna kind of take
They were
care of
just
all the
waiting
problems.
around all this time, by the way. Like, you know, they did,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah. So if that's true, right, then maybe what's happening right now in science, that scientists use AI to write papers, and journals, and the committees that accept papers use AI to score them. Maybe that's the right thing to have, so that we're gonna start drifting from the traditional way that we write papers, and kind of like that's not exactly something that is easy to read, and it's not exactly something that is easy to benefit from, that we will kind of start shifting the style towards the AI optimized content. There's this new term, that Anthropic is pushing, and a lot of other places, that, okay, so the context for the AI is going to be kind of encapsulated into those skills, like those basically markdown documents that are optimized in format for the AI to read from and kind of do stuff, right? So maybe the research will shift into that format, so that we basically, okay, we are snowballing towards all AI research, and people will just maybe kind of be kind of like giving it direction, but they are not going to be defining, hey, here's the related research, right, that we've got to write down, and here's the experiment that we have to run, because the AI will do that, and it will do the simulations and stuff like that. So maybe this is a natural basically progression, right, towards the AGI and super intelligence, right?
Well, there's a few fascinating concepts there, I guess. I was just trying to think of my own strange journey into physics, because AI sort of led me to physics, and so did hi-fi stereo stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
because it's like, why does this work and not work? I guess that's the point. Like, it seems to work and not work, and it's very mysterious why. In fact, last night, I don't know exactly why, but around 3 a.m., this fairly loud sound woke us both up, and it was a very interesting sound. All I can say, it turned out it was a train whistle that was stuck. So it was about a 5 minute or more or longer sound. So it was loud enough to wake us up. It was loud enough. I checked the decibels on it. It was like, normally it's 30 and it was like 40. So it's like, a significantly loud sound, which is interesting, because I guess train whistles are loud. But what both of us really were amazed by was how lovely it was. Like, it sort of shifted, and like, it was this weird thing, because I guess it's so loud, but it also harmonizes and reverberates. And anyway, it's the reason why you go from hi-fi to physics, because you're like, well, why do things cluster together, and why, and then of course it gets you to AI, right? Which is like, why do these things come out and these other things don't?
Yeah.
And that's a fascinating idea, right? Some ideas are of their time and they're worthwhile, and sometimes they're not. And that's why research is interesting, because 90% of the research wasn't useful until it's useful. See what I mean? So you get your Eulers and your your Schrodingers and whatever, like, they just happen to be the most useful thing at the right particular time. But they had to go and read and understand, or this was the whole, my friend's a librarian, librarian scientist, whatever that's called, right? The study, running libraries, and you ran libraries for CUNY, New York, the whole system. And libraries are really fascinating for this reason, because, right, they're supposed to be where you go and you're supposed to read all these books, as far as I know. Well, that's pretty time consuming and not very, that's basically time consuming. And as professors, we're supposed to have read all these books. So then we pick the ones that we like, so you don't have to read all of them.
Yeah.
So all through time, there's this filtration idea, right? Which is interesting, because do you not need that anymore? Because we have this other thing that'll do it for us. And I'm actually kind of on the fence, because I know that I wouldn't have read some of these papers if the question I asked, it didn't cite these papers, as answers. And then when I read the papers, of course, they didn't really answer my question, but they were interesting in their own right. You know what I mean? It's not like everything is a one-to-one match.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that there's some positive aspects to it, right? Like the AI might be able to help us with this immense power that the comet is, that kind of safeguarding the top journals, right? Maybe there's going to be some movement there, because they have a power to actually shut down a very legitimate research, right? And I'm perhaps there is a lot of lost value there, right? Like people might be coming up with excellent ideas, but there is going to be some well-accomplished professors that know everything, and they're going to decide, okay, this paper is no good, right? It has no chance, right? And maybe that is a tremendous loss, a loss to, to progress, right? I mean, so. Or maybe, conversely, I'm totally wrong and they know better and they are doing the right thing. But I think, there is certainly, we are hearing a lot of complaints in physics, right? Like, string theory apparently is, kind of the only thing that is, kind of quote unquote accepted as legitimate research in physics. And there is a huge community of people saying that this is a dead end and we shouldn't be really kind of pushing it, right? So these kind of things might be happening, and maybe in mathematics it's the same happening. It's just nobody knows about it because there is like maybe five guys on the planet that understand, like what's kind of good mathematics and what's bad, like in that kind of highest research levels. So I actually have kind of some positive kind of anticipation that the AI might maybe not come up with solutions for everything, and but AI might come up with a solution to a simulation, right? Like to experiment, right? We might be able to experiment in chemistry, within the neural network of the LLM or whatever we want to call it, like physics LM or whatever, right? Or something like that, right? Or it's going to come up with like immensely efficient. Uh, and there's no question about that, immensely efficient connection of the dots, right? Like, hey, I have a research, I need to pull related research from the body of, kind of like multi-domain, right? Like maybe if I'm doing AI, then maybe I don't know a lot of research in other fields, but AI will do it for me, right? So there's no question about that. So that's kind of, like a tremendous knowledge enrichment, to research processes. So yeah, but yeah, and maybe yeah, so maybe, and there's maybe existential things, right? Because there might be things that now are going to be possible that are not going to be very positive for humanity because of the dangers of things that are low-hanging fruit and can be kind of used in malicious contexts. So yeah, I'm generally kind of like very upbeat about the capability of doing deep research, kind of like with the system too, right? Like there's basically tremendous improvements even over frontier models if you kind of like handle properly the planning process, right? Like, hey, what do we really do? Can you create a plan before you start solving, right? And then,
Hmm.
can you evaluate, right? Like, can you really kind of evaluate what you've got and create like a rubric for it and then run the rubric, see what's, like gap analysis, stuff like that, and then recompute, right? So those are obvious things that everybody was talking about, 20 years ago, and now we have engines that can do it. So why
Hmm.
not? Why not, right?
Oh, I mean, and you're right. I mean, those sort of things I think have already become evident. I just wonder if, well, I mean, maybe this. Speaking of the library, I was in the library the other day, and I've spent a fair amount of my spare time when I'm not talking to you, learning to cook. And when
Mm,
I say learning to cook, I mean, well, it's a complex topic, which I'm not going to go into. But I looked into that shelf, and there are thousands of cookbooks. And I kept thinking like, wow, there's thousands of cookbooks, right? But
mm,
there really isn't that many ways to cook if you think about it. Like there is a very small subset, and if you get
mm,
them right, usually your food's pretty good. And if
mm,
you ignore them completely, you will spin forever. And like, let's just put string theorists on the line, right? Like, it's
mm,
that feeling of like, well, yeah, there's a lot of junk, right? And it doesn't mean that the junk is poor. Maybe someone has done their best to document their cuisine of their land. And I keep thinking, yeah, I have that book, but I'm like, it's really hard to make that food here because the reason why it's the food of the land is the stuff that you make that is plentiful and you know what I mean? Like that's why you make this food is because you can get the ingredients. you know, and these ingredients have been sort of honed over the years. In fact, we've, I guess, created all food pretty much, you know, like we've cultivated the food that we think is edible and is edible and is good for us. Whereas that didn't come naturally, is what I mean. You know, like most of this stuff is stuff we cultivated. And what you're saying is the cultivator can now be AI. And that's fine, right? I mean, cultivation is a laudable thing, you know, like, yeah, we don't need every research paper, but maybe we need this sort of vectorized, queryable thing to make sure that we're on the right track, right? Because I don't know that the string theorists had anyone to talk to, right? All they really did was like, hey, I know how this math thing works, you know, maybe this is how the universe, you know, whatever. I don't know. I'm the dimensionality of it is annoying to me personally because it's weird. You only get 3 or none, you know. And that was my thing. Like they don't come, like everything else is artificial. Like you don't have a 2-dimensional universe. Anyway, I'm not going to go into physics. And you said that it was these boards of people though that were the filters, and they're suspect. That's what we were going to get at, right? People are always going to screw this up, right? And they can't not screw it up. They're fallible. They're human, you know. They're going to pick their pal. They're going to cite the guy who always gets cited. Do you see what I mean? Like that's the way it works. In fact, I have to do citations in my class, and I actually have never done citations. So I'm always a little bit like puzzled because they do it properly, but I never check their citations because I'm like, well, you're just saying something. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, right? So it's that strange thing of like, are you just saying something obvious, but then someone else said it who gets cited a lot because they said it first? I mean, then the Beatles would be, you know, that's what I'm saying. All songs quote the Beatles in some way, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, so the process, the research processes, you know, in the academic world, you know, kind of maybe kind of like it's a kind of like a double filtering. So to your point, right, you get published, you know, if you have the name, right? So what is and maybe that's intentional, right? Like what is the way to percolate a new idea into the kind of like publishing, you know, kind of game, which is the end game, right? Like for the academia, right? They don't have to productize it, right? But you know, publishing is basically the end game, right? Your paper appearing in the top journal for a professor is the end game, right? Probably more important than teaching, right? In many places, right? So perhaps this was intentional, like the new idea may kind of get kind of published if, let's say, you are a new guy, but you actually are working with guys that are already kind of very well known, right? So first, you know, the very well known
the operative
guys,
word being guy, right?
Yeah. I mean, the teams, you know, the
no, it's a dude thing, is what I'm saying.
Scientists, you know, like so the scientists that are already very well known in the process of writing paper, and you will have a new idea, they will kind of screen it first, right? So that, you know, that's the first filtering process. And then, you know, the journal, you know, committee, you know, is going to be the second filter, but it's going to be less, you know, kind of strict, you know, in terms of their criteria, because there is already that very well-known guy that are already put his or her name on the top of the paper, and somebody new came up with a new idea, and it's kind of okay, it's acceptable, right? So maybe that percolation, right, is kind of like a double step filtering process, right? And maybe that's by design. But at the end of the day, now if we plug in the AI process into this, right, then, you know, to use your analogy, how, you know, let's say if the AI is doing the cooking, how does the AI know that whatever the new recipe is going to be tasty, right? Like so in the research kind of analogy, right? How does the AI know that the outcome is going to be useful or valid or important, right? So that is kind of like basically the same problem, right?
Right, I think you nailed it, which is almost, and this is where the human computer thing, is that usefulness has to do with a whole work. Like I did a whole lot of work with scientists in crop science. Let's put it that way. Biggest company in the world, right? And I can tell you not any particular clue of how they did anything, but you have a ton of competent people, and you have a problem set that is somewhat iterative, right? Like you're growing thing, this is an interesting thing, but you've got really smart people, and you produce seed that you pretty much know will grow in certain conditions, and then you're able to, with more data, map something very precisely so that you know what to do where, and it's all very optimization oriented, right? Whereas I saw a thing recently about a huge desert that is being created in China, and they tried their best, in a sense, to plant all these trees to try to break the desert creeping, because that's, I guess, what deserts do, and costs of hundreds of millions, etc. And most of it failed, of course, because you had to use a ton of water to get these things to work. Well, what they found, or they decided, and someone clever did, and I don't know if there was a research on this. I don't even know if it's true, but I like the story, which is there's this breed of horse that has existed forever that we don't like, pretty much, right? Because they're not useful to us. But they're these weird little fat horses. And they said, well, we can get them. They were taken from here, but they all died off. We get them from zoos. We bring them and reintroduce them to this environment. So these tame horses learn to become wild, which is a thing. But what happened is they're kind of put back into a habitat, and they I guess figure it out. But one of the main things they do is that they clomp all over the place, which breaks up the sand and allows water to now creep into the soil, which then reactivates seeds that have been there for 50 years or whatever, plus some horse dung to be nice, and suddenly the ecosystem revives, right? So because it's such a complex series of things, you introduced a dozen horses, they grew to be thousands of horses, and then they create the world that sustains them, plus a million other species, right? This is the rainforest approach, Yeah, cool. And so, I don't know why I like the story, only because it is AI's charm to me is that it isn't in one field, right? If I read a book on physics, it's not going to go talk too much about Bach or Gödel, or what I mean, unless you're that one book that I really like, which talks about Bach and Gödel, and like that was the point of the book, was that things are different. They're not different, but they can be seen in different ways. Like you have a different perspective on how do you do some sort of meaningful truth telling, or come up with something useful, right? Which is that recursion is useful. How do you teach recursion? How do you even understand recursion? That's one example, which might bring me, and I know we always ramble, but I did have a topic, and maybe it fits in, right? The topic is a piece I'm trying to write, which is called AI, Artificial Intelligence is Magic, right? Because we love the Arthur C. Clarke magic thing, right? But the subtitle is, of course, it's a trick. Because I love magic because of that, right? Magic is, it's not magic. That's the point of magic, right? It's just that the methods that someone uses might be so outrageously exploitative of your senses or your attention span or whatever, right? Or their skill is so great that, they can just make something, you put a coin in and it's gone. Like, it's great, but the coin isn't gone. But you still love that they made the coin go away. So I think that AI has a little of this. So I was trying to dispel the things, and I thought maybe you could contribute, that we think it does, but it doesn't do. So my wife had an example today. She said, I had AI write a thing to describe a proposal I'm making. I wanted it to do the writing. Then I went to another AI and I gave it that statement, and I said, does this sound like AI wrote this? Which I think is the more interesting thing here, because
Mm.
I do that too. You pit them against each other. Anyway, so the other eye says, yeah, this sounds like AI wrote it because it was very equivocal. It said a lot, but it didn't really form anything. Like it was
Mm. Mm.
verbose. And then it asked, can I rewrite it? And then it rewrote it. And that thing to me is statement one is that what my fear is, they're mimics. They don't know anything. And you can debate this. I don't know. That's the magic number one, is you think they're knowledgeable. That's what I mean. You attribute them as
Mm.
being knowledgeable. So tell me I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, so we can debate this, so the easiest for me to kind of like, and I don't mean to kind of like dispel it, right? But
No,
there's
I want you to.
several layers, right? So mechanistically, right, the architecture of a neural network is not very far from the architecture of a human brain, right? So
Sure.
if you grab, a piece of gray matter from the brain, and have those activations kind of like analyzed, I mean, it's basically okay. It's a network, right? And we are representing the large language models as matrices, but the representation basically works like like an interconnected network of neurons, right? So from
Sure.
from that point of view, you can make the same argument about the human brain, right? Like, hey, it's just kind of like a big network of activations, and maybe there is some sort of a ghost in the machine emerging because the number of interconnections is higher than the number of interconnections in a kind of large language models, right? So maybe that is the emergent, ghost in the machine, right? So that's the consciousness that is emerging, but at the end of the day, right? I mean, there is a strong argument, right? Like, hey, maybe we are getting close, right? So
Hmm.
maybe it's an unfair statement, right, to the AIs, basically that
Well,
they
well,
really.
my counter argument, which I think is the more the perspective here, is that we, as we may be, tend to also not realize much about ourselves. And the one reason
Mm.
why is our brain actually probably spends 90% of its time managing all the stuff that is right in front of you, right? Like
Mm.
every single thing that happens in your body is managed by you, as well as that rainforest thing, right?
Mm.
Everything is interconnected and nothing is on its own responsible for anything. And our brains, I think we just kind of have this fun idea that there's some thought
Mm.
personality thing in there, you know, that is separate from everything else, right? And I think the thing is the AI lacks any of that, right? It has no corporeal job to do. In fact, it doesn't have any job to do. So weirdly, it is even more disembodied than we think we are, right? We think we're
Mm.
this poor conscious, suffering thought bubble in a world not of our making, and in a body not of our making either, right? Like,
Mm.
so weirdly, this is also probably a little bit more philosophical, but I still think this idea of it being knowledgeable is what I'm trying to attack, right? Like that
Mm.
I think it just tells you what you want to hear, right? Or it
Well,
tells you
so
what you can understand, and that's another part of it, right? Like it does not have a personality to defend, nor any authority or anything to uphold, right? Like it's not like us.
mm.
We have to live in the real world, as they say. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the second argument that we can make, that okay, so neural networks, large language models, kind of similar architecture to the human brain. So similarity is there, right? What is the most dissimilar is that there is a training process that with us humans is continuous, right? It's very heavily multimodal. It is taking a very long time. right? So that is a very contrasting from the current training processes where you're basically downloading the whole internet and whatever, right? Dumping it on the AI and feeding into the neural network in the loops. And then kind of you are getting, maybe after a few days or weeks of training, you are getting, your model kind of ready, right? So that is probably the biggest difference. And it's going to be disappearing slowly because the holy grail is to kind of like allow the AIs to kind of be continuously trained pretty much like human brains, are, right? So yeah, so that is maybe the source of all the issues that we are discussing, right? That deficient training process that is based mostly on basically internet data, right? And disembodied.
Well, it also, I guess, would also skew toward things that were, well, I, I'm putting here because my students actually have gone off to Wikipedia, and they've used Wikipedia as a source for some sort of exploration, and I don't really go into it deeply because I'm like, well, Wikipedia isn't a thing, right? Like back to academia, it's just a vague agreement that something is something. You see what I mean? Like it is also not truthful, but it probably isn't lying. But it's that weird middle ground, and so when you weight sources, because if you train yourself on Wikipedia and Reddit, you're going to have a pretty interesting model, right? Because it will have a couple of dimensions, but that certainly is hardly all dimensions, right? That we would experience. We, being you and me, you just were in Texas, so you were in an unexpected situation where you may or may not have felt alien to this place, right? I mean, you unless they put a hat on you and gave you a horse, or I don't know what they do in College Station, but if you're in Dallas, they give you a Lexus and a Rolex. But in
man,
College Station,
I wish I went to Dallas. Yeah.
Yeah, we all wish we lived in Dallas. But that's just a cultural change. You see what I mean? Like you might culturally be aware that you don't have a lot of learning about the place you're in, but you can adjust. Where when you get out of those two sources, I don't know, the LLMs just sort of adjust. Like let's say you gave them all of academia. Let's throw in all of go from Magna Carta on and give you all of that. You know what I mean? I don't think it still gives you a picture of what the point of these things are. Right? They're just weird artifacts that we have in our culture that may or may not be useful in any particular situation, but sometimes they're just enjoyable or I certainly tear up when I read the Gettysburg Address, but it doesn't really have anything to do with me, right? It has to do with this weird country we live in, that this was a weird way of saying, oh, wow, this country is interesting to me and I need to tell you about it. And it's more significant probably that it's sitting next to a huge statue and it's carved into a wall, but you can still read. I saw a thing on the Magna Carta, so I was like, okay, Magna Carta is pretty interesting too. But it was basically a lot of people were really fed up for generations, and this is kind of what you get. Right? Like, okay, this exploitation thing, it's not working for us, King whatever. So either way, but as I said, there isn't any real way for an LLM or anything to do anything other than just sort of vectorize this stuff, which I still think is weak. But let's go into magic.
But let's just kind of like stop for a moment on the vectorization, right? So let's human brain is vectorizing stuff as well. I mean,
sure,
just imagine
Hey, I just learned about the Magna Carta, man, and that wasn't even in there before.
Human retina, for example, it's taking the photons as the photon is hitting the retina, it's creating an electrical impulse that is discretized. So
absolutely.
in a way, human brain or human retina is basically the same thing as the thing that you have in your digital camera that is basically converting photons into electrical impulses and then into JPEGs, right? So I think so yeah, just wanted to kind of clarify the architecture, right? Like the vector is actually the vehicle of thinking, of the thought, right? That is our thinking is basically a progression of those vectors and activations throughout regions in our brain, and maybe that is maybe that's the best kind of way of thinking, or maybe we're gonna come up because AIs are now optimizing themselves, right? So I'm hearing quite a bit about, now the GPUs, are not designed by humans anymore. The new GPU is designed by AIs running on the old GPUs, right? So perhaps we will have something new that will have like bigger impact. But yeah, please continue.
No. You've got to. I mean, I was going to go into Gaussian splats, but I'm not going to go there because what you did point out though is that you can collapse these things in many ways, right? We used to just feed JPEGs of dogs to a machine learning model, and it learned pretty much this weird bunch of pixels means a dog or whatever. This weird group of data is a dog. That's all, right? But we don't have any problem with that because we know that what dogs look like in the real world. And remember the seven fingers thing? These were the fun early days of AI, which is it just didn't really know what we know so very easily, right? Is that people don't have infinite amounts of fingers. You know what I mean? They just happen to look really different all the time. And when they're collapsed into a flat, meaning, like a flat surface, they mean even less, right? You've taken away an enormous context. So I was going to get, and this is where I really wanted to debate you on this one. I think LLMs are the best, and this is where we have to learn as a human species. They are fantastic at system one. I think they are terrible at system two. But so are we. I'm just saying we're great at system one too, right? Like, but we're not as good as an LLM. I don't know.
Well, a reactive chat system, right? That is kind of like not really kind of introspective at all, and that is really not kind of proactive in solutioning and things like that, right? I mean, the race right now is kind of extending the LLMs, and kind of.
Oh no, we want them to be good at system two. I know, but I'm just saying I think they're inherently not good at it. Like they can't really be good at it. But
well, I mean, yeah. So, but let's kind of be fair a little bit, right? Eliza was not good at all, but the perception was that it was great, right? A lot of people got fooled. Right. So,
but now where I'm getting is we can believe a lot of stuff, that isn't true.
Yeah, and people were attached to Super Mario's, in the early console days where it was just like a matrix of 64 by 64 pixels, and Super Mario was just that, and people were kind of attached to it, right? So I think that we can now discretize, system two steps into those, small things that you are saying that perhaps are good, right? So yeah, I would say that, so the system one is easier, right? That is great. And I mean, if conversation, is the is kind of something that is important to us, right? So, especially if you have a system that has a deep lake to fish from, right? So,
that's what I mean. It will beat us at system one. That's why I'm saying it's existentially threatening, right? That unless it's dealing with, like surfing or something like that, where system one or muscle memory will get you very far in life, right? Like if you can manage the real world, it's not. But when it comes to, hey, I know the answer to that, it's 12. You know what I mean? That's the system one thing that I think is obviously the very first thing that was starting to crack when we started into this journey, right? Like, oh, wow, I've trained my system one to be pretty good. I can make a meal now and know why the meal tasted good. That takes a lot of muscle memory and practice, but it took a lot of system two, right? Like, which is really sort of this deep, thoughtful. It's basically the topic of my course too, which is trying to get you to understand like you have to work at this. System two is not, and for I guess does everyone know system one and two? But anyway, system two is to me kind of more about you have a choice. You have a choice, yes or no. Make the choice, yes or no. System two is I'm not going to make a choice. Right? It's probably as simple as that, right? Like you are not committing because you don't know all the information. You don't know, you're sort of respecting that maybe either of these decisions might be suspect, but you need to find out, you know? And that's a useful, I think it's useful because acting a lot doesn't make things better, right? You know, doing it and not doing it is actually changing, you know, then we'll get all Bayesian, right? You make a choice. Well, you kind of commit to that choice, right? You don't get to go backwards, which is, I think, my other trick. By the way, it's a trick. This is like, it's really good at system one, but we think it's good at system two. The trick is their LLMs are terrible with time. My favorite topic, right? Like it really, really can't handle time. And I thought of this as actually being a big part of the internet at one point, right? Is like the internet doesn't really give a shit about time either, right? And it really had to be imposed upon it because remember how the internet as it was destroyed. Pretty much, it just goes away, right? It wasn't like books that can sit around or like the Magna Carta apparently sit around for 500 years and get preserved because you know pretty good, you know. So this idea that things don't stick around, but yet they're meaningful, right? It's a little bit like newspapers. We publish them because sooner or later somebody in a movie has to go back and look in an old newspaper to find out, you know, the secret to the whatever. Anyway, I don't know. They're useful for some reason, but the internet just kept destroying itself, which made me wonder a lot about temporality, you know, which is really important to us. Super important in some ways, right? Like, hey, the near future, the near past, the ancient past, you know, and whatever. We're always interested in the future. I don't know. I know that it cannot ever understand time. What do you think? And this is a big flaw.
Well, I think so. So the nature of information processing within the neural network, right, is kind of instantaneous, right? So you are processing those vectors throughout you know neural network, and you are getting an output pretty much you know maybe you know at a fixed time more or less, right? So so then if you have a piece of information that needs to be placed in time, right? Then you have to tag it, right? You have to somehow convey that information. So basically, you know, the date or timestamp, right, becomes a piece of information. It's an enhancement, right? So I think, learned the concept of time during training, right? And I don't think it's, you know, I don't think it's out of question that you know, at some point, if the AIs kind of are enabled to learn pretty much in a way that is maybe high bandwidth but similar to ours, that the understanding of time will emerge, you know, from that process. You know, because I mean, ultimately, right? I mean, if the architecture of the system is similar to ours, you know, our brains, right? If the learning process is similar to ours, maybe faster, maybe a little slower, but, you know, let's say somewhat similar. Right now it's completely dissimilar. But let's say if the similarities kind of keep showing up at various stages of, you know, like memory retention and all that learning processes that we can think of, then perhaps there is going to be features that will emerge, right? And then let's not forget, you know, the quantum stuff, where you will be able to basically drop out of the timeline, perform a parallel computation, and go back to our universe, right? That's kind of like what it is, right? Like the fact that you know quantum you know is so promising is the fact that you know you can basically kind of you know leave our timeline and kind of do calculations that otherwise would kind of you know took you know decades, right?
Sure.
So
right.
so yeah. So there is a possibility that you know So right now it's on our hands, right? So if we are building systems that are supposed to be understanding time, we have to explicitly do it, through our data structure and knowledge representation, right? And then time becomes just a feature that we are processing, right? Like a time series information, right?
Well, I mean, I'm tackling this. So here's my, all these, the magic part, remember, is just saying these are the tricks it's doing. It's tricks, right? It isn't anything outrageous, and it's not anything that we don't do either. But it's the equivocation to that as being real magic is where it gets tricky. So I'm trying to do this because every week I'm getting a feedback on my class, right? And I ask them just sort of the open-ended thing. So what I'm trying to do is to have it understand time, which is that there's some sort of variation, right? You've got 13 people having different experiences, but then there's some cohesion. And what I'm looking for, is that if I do this myself, I will bias it. That's all there is, right? I will leave things out. I will do everything that those academics do, right? Which is to not really tackle any outliers, but probably just see some strange consensus. So what I've been working on is trying to understand it as I add more data. Does the story change? And that's where it's really struggling, because that's what I mean by time, right? That we see things as not being a collapse. It's like the weather. The whole point of the weather, the whole point of the ecosystem is that it never is collapsible, right? It always has to change. And just because you collapsed it and it's, what is it today? 52 degrees today, right? Well, in a minute, it won't be. Or maybe where you are, it won't be. Or maybe there's a strange sound playing here, but you don't hear it. You know what I mean? Like there's these very temporal things that happen that do change everything. But they're not anything we can handle in our models very easily, right? We can only say, hey, I don't know, what is it? How many dimensions do you get to in an LLM query, right? Like it can go up to tens of thousands of dimensions of choices, but it can't ever go backwards like we can't, So it can only sort of retry it again, which is the fun, but that also collapses things. So it's also a little like flawed where we're not, because what we would do is be like, I'm sick of this topic. I got to go make lunch. You see what I mean? Like we're kind of superhuman in the ability to actually not engage fully all the time, which gives us the ability to get some other input. I always think sleep or dreaming is one of those, right? Like, oh, I had this really hard problem and then I went to sleep and then I woke up and I realized, oh, I should try this, right? That's our superpower. And I'm just keep thinking like that's the thing that it can't do, because that's the real world. So the other thing is the LLMs and the real world are just two different things, right? Like it can pretend to talk about the real world. It just doesn't understand, or it's not even part of whatever. Because how often do we talk about the real world? Not that often. We kind of take it for granted that people know what the real world is most of the time, right? Like we might have to describe how derivatives work, but when you watch people in a trading pit, then you see what the real world is, which is a bunch of people yelling at each other or whatever, right? That's the signal that we're used to dealing with, and it can't understand that, right? Because it isn't even attuned to such things, the signal noise problem. So, when and again, the magic is you're fed all this data, you've got a really good ability to do system one, like stunning, right? And I think it almost can't get better. I still keep thinking these models have to like level out by now, right? Like, because how good can you be at system one, right? That's the problem.
Well, I think the whole progress is that, probably we don't have system ones anymore, because system two is now sitting under the hood in the neural network. So that's where all the battles are, and the improvements like, hey, there's loops, internal plans, internal self-evaluations. So I think that, yeah, I mean, the system one probably ended very, very early, maybe even before ChatGPT kind of started to be, like mainstream.
What do you mean ended? Sorry, I'm
Well,
still saying that's all it can do right now is just
well, I kind of
great system.
so let's separate the surface phenomena with the underlying algorithms, right?
Sure.
So the reactive nature of a system, kind of like what ELIZA was, is no longer there. The fact that we are improving the answers is kind of a function of bigger and bigger neural networks, but also a
Hmm.
function of the internal reasoning mechanisms, so that the improvements kind of comes algorithmically, not just through the size of the neural network, right? So I think
In
we are.
terms of like it's not accuracy, I guess, but again, they have some weird. It's like everything when it comes to these things. There's some weird
Yeah.
benchmarking, right? I
Yeah,
mean, I don't know.
so benchmarking, right? So there's a math benchmarking, there is a knowledge benchmarking, there's logic, there's quote unquote intelligence tests, right? So I think those improvements are coming from the fact that we are moving further away from system one and towards system two inside the silicon, right? So that is kind of what might be driving the improvements.
Well, I mean that I think your optimism is worthwhile. I just think if you're saying system two is deliberative, which I don't think is possible, right? Like it can't really deliberate. It isn't designed in a way to I always say unless there's energy uh constraints added to it.
Mhm.
Like unless you add some constraint to it, it can never say, "Hey, this is not worth answering. Go figure it out yourself." Which is what we would do almost every single week if we weren't so happy to talk to each other, right? Like
Well, but there's components, right? I mean,
energy
there's
conservation is real, man. Hey, you got me into the physics thing. I mean, low energy
yeah,
states
yeah,
are absolutely prescribed in every situation. Except
yeah,
for our crazy high energy stuff that we like to do, right?
yeah.
So ultimately, I'm just saying, yes, it can out energy us, but its deliberative nature can't be created, right? And
Mm.
that's why we should be able to take or leave a LLM's engagement. Also, probably why I think why shouldn't they be operating systems? They probably couldn't manage permissions is the real problem. And I don't think they understand that permissions are a real thing, and you really shouldn't rewrite those tables, and memory management is a real thing. All these things are actually, we'll do our Van, it's Van Neumann, right? Johnny, is that,
Mhm.
am I doing that right? Like this architecture isn't, you can't change it, I don't
Mm.
think, right? So it's environment it has yet to really understand, so therefore it's almost baby like, right? Like it doesn't know if it was in the real world agentic, as I
Mhm.
said, it would have to learn everything that we learned, which we would get sick of and shut it off, right? That's all. It's like I don't think we would want it to learn. Maybe, I don't know. This is why hopefully in the academic world, this is what they're supposed to do, right? Is crazy goofball stuff like this to see if it works.
Well, yeah, that's kind of So there was this idea that, hey, what is science, right? Science is this crazy tailor, right? That it's kind of creating
It's
all
a bunch of
those
cake recipes. That's
pieces.
all it is.
Yeah, pieces of clothes that are maybe it's gonna fit, some unknown beings, right? And if they fit, then we have something useful. If it doesn't, then that's great. That's still basic research, right? Maybe we have learned how to create another piece of clothing that is going to fit another being, right? So that's it's kind of like an analogy, right? That I sometimes like.
I love your analogies, and I can't believe we just got through another week. Yeah, I guess my last point is it probably doesn't have to do with LLMs, but I'll keep working on this article with your input. Thank you.
No.
But the data that we capture on almost everything is inconsistent and idiosyncratic. That was my other thing is that's the fun of most of these institutions that want to add AI somehow is like, oh, your data just, no, you're not even close. Like,
Yeah.
you just don't capture anything, or you've been capturing the wrong things. So who knows? That's my hope, is that we start to capture things more.
Mm.
My hope is that we capture people's feelings more. That's kind of my thing. Like, what if you could capture the feeling of a group of people and interpret it through an LLM so that people aren't
Yeah.
biasing it? That to me is just an interesting idea, since it wasn't ever possible, I don't think, before.
Yeah.
See how
Yeah.
many see how
Affective
far I get
reasoning. Yeah.
for next week. Till then,
All right.
cheers, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. See you next week.